Good evening to all of you. You're watching Lok Sabha TV. I'm Anurag Punetha with you. China celebrating its 70 years of Communist Party rule. This is important for the China and to the world as well, as China is nursing an ambition since last couple of decades to become world's #1 economy and wants to establish its hegemony in the region. The event was meant to extol China's journey from a poor nation to being the world's second largest economy. There was a huge military parade to celebrate the occasion. Some approximately 15,000 troops, along with tanks, missiles and high-tech drones, paraded down the avenue of external peace as President Xi Jinping and other Communist Party leaders watched from rostrum overlooking. State media described this as the country's biggest ever military parade. Xi Jinping delivered a speech invoking Chinese dream of national rejuvenation as his grand vision of restoring the country's to perceived past glory. But Xi Jinping also faces a clutch of challenges from US trade war to months of unrest in Hong Kong. US trade war, as we all know, that negotiations have been dragging on and that is causing problem to China. And African swine fever has raced through the country's pig supply and that has sent pork prices in China soaring. But the major headache is Hong Kong, where the pro-democracy protesters hit the street early to bid to grab the spotlight from the Beijing. With a series of rallies against what they see as a erosion of their freedom rights, Hong Kong police said that they were expecting violence across the city. Police has warned it could be very, very dangerous to the people. So in the face, and they're saying that in the face of the tyranny, this is their last chance to at least put the protest. But as Xi Jinping has declared that the no force can shake China, how he wants to take China to its pristine glory, and that is a dream of the Chinese people. But the geopolitics of Xi Jinping's Chinese dream, what are the problems and prospects we are going to discuss in this edition of Public Forum. Before we proceed for the discussion, to our guest, to our panelist, let's have a look what Xi Jinping, the President of China, has said at this moment.
我们要坚持和平发展道路，奉行互利共赢的开放战略。
We must adhere to the path of peaceful development, pursue a mutually beneficial strategy of opening up, and continue to push forward to create a community of shared future for mankind, together with people of all the other countries.
我们要坚持和平统一、一国两制的方针，保持香港、澳门长期繁荣稳定，推动。
Of our journey forward, we must adhere to the principle of peaceful reunification and one country, two systems, maintain long-term prosperity and stability of Hong Kong and Macau, push for peaceful development of cross-strait relationship, until all Chinese people to continue to work hard for the complete reunification of our nation.
国家主权、安全、发展利益。 坚决维护世界和平。
One guest, Professor Shriram Cholia, international relations expert, has joined me over the Skype. A very warm welcome in the show, Mr. Cholia, Professor Cholia. Well, my first question is that what Xi Jinping has said that no one can shake China, and he has also said that his nation will move forward with the stability in Hong Kong and Macau. What do you make of his statement first? My first question is this.
Well, Anurag, as we know, 70 years of communist rule is a huge milestone in the history of not just of China, but of Asia and of the world. So I think Xi Jinping is using this, special occasion to send, kind of a reassurance of strength, and that communist rule is unshakable. And despite the protests you mentioned in Hong Kong, as well as the economic slowdown because of the trade war and other reasons, And despite other forms of grievances across this vast country, he wants to convey an image of strength and resilience and of stability above everything else. Because although they call themselves communists,
Yeah.
Anurag, today these are conservatives because they are in power and they don't want change. And Xi Jinping is very, very always scared of change. Anything that may lead to some kind of a revolt or a rebellion or overthrow of a communist system. They have been studying the Soviet Union model for a long time. And Xi Jinping often tells his cadres, the Communist Party workers and the entire vast paraphernalia of the bureaucrats, the state machinery, he keeps reminding them, the Soviets made a mistake. They relaxed political control and we paid the price for it. So we should never do that. So I think he's trying to convey toughness in the face of a lot of challenges.
Okay, but if you go to the global media, Global Times, that is a state-run media of China, there have been many articles, I mean, from what you call that China's success story is an alternate to the Western style of the business and the things. But in his speech, Xi Jinping also said that the people of the China has to work continuously to work hard for the complete reunification. And that shows somehow a very hidden message to the people who are protesting in Hong Kong.
Of course, he means when Xi Jinping talks about reunification, he means Hong Kong full, absorption, and also Taiwan, which of course right now China does not control, but it believes is also an inalienable part of China. So this is a message to the West, because the Western world has always supported Taiwan's semi-autonomous, semi-independent status, and Taiwan and Hong Kong semi-autonomous status. So both these, I think, the message is that China is strong today. China is a superpower, and you cannot stop us from, taking back Hong Kong and Taiwan fully. So I think that's a message that especially the Communist Party media, the mouthpieces, the propaganda system is, designed in such a way to keep on hammering home this point as a kind of a warning to the West to stay away, because the Chinese Communist Party, even though it's very strong in the mainland, it feels very paranoid about these threats, Anurag. So it feels that the West is somehow trying to instigate rebellion against the communist dictatorship and that it must ward them off. So I think they're using this occasion, 70 years of communist rule, to try and push back at what they see as a malign Western intervention that is which is hostile and which they fear is meant to break up communist rule and break up China.
Okay, but this huge military parade with approximately 15,000 soldiers, with the high-end, with the tanks, missiles and high-tech drones, though normally many countries does this, I mean, on their national day. But China's military strength, do you think poses some serious challenges in Asia, and particularly in South China Sea and other in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, surely China has risen. It is easily Asia's most powerful military. And for many, many years, they have been carrying out what is called a revolution in military affairs, RMA.
Okay.
And under Xi Jinping, he has also reorganized the commands. Earlier, it used to be, Air Force, Navy, and Army, they were separate commands. But now he has done theater commands. So, for example, the Western Command, which is headquartered in Chengdu, is supposed to take care of India and Central Asia and some of the countries on this side. And then they have an Eastern Command, they have a Southern Command. So now they have done a lot of streamlining, and they have a anti-access area denial strategy, which is to prevent the Western forces, especially the US, which has a lot of military assets in the Pacific, from intervening. So suppose China grabs Taiwan by force, then they don't want an outside power to intervene and try to stop them, at least for 24 to 48 hours, and after which it's a fait accompli and nobody can dislodge China. Okay. So they have invested a lot in military strategy, in military hardware. They have got anti-satellite weapon capability. They have anti-ship missiles, and they have a very vast arsenal of anti-ship missiles to counter the US aircraft carriers and the US Navy in the region. Okay. So definitely in South China Sea, Anurag, the other countries cannot match China. Individually, even collectively, the ASEAN countries cannot match China. So the only threat they see in that region is the US Navy. And their strategy has been to push the US Navy out. The US military had a first chain of command, first island of defense, second line of defense, and now these chain of island, they're trying to push the military out so that you have a practical hegemony of China. They say that, South China Sea, East China Sea, Western Pacific, the entire thing is a Chinese lake. And that is what, worries the world. But that is how they're pushing and asserting, saying, now we are a big power and now we should no longer be quiet and hide our strength.
But how do you foresee the China's, what you call, the way China's economy is functioning at the moment? I mean, China is facing the pinch at the moment because of the trade war with the US. China is also facing some problem in the African continent. But how do you see? I mean, do we have a reason to worry somehow? Will China push its BRI project and will face further challenges in especially the Indian Ocean or not? How do you see that?
Well, Anurag, definitely the economy has slowed down. It is the slowest in several decades now. And part of the reason, of course, has to do with the trade war and the sudden loss of the export market to the US.
Yep.
They are trying to sell to other countries as a substitute for that. But, the US consumer was the #1 buyer of Chinese products. And now they are struggling to find alternative markets, which are, have the purchasing power like the US consumers.
Okay.
So that is definitely a blow. Also, I think Xi Jinping, in order to consolidate his political power, he has actually brought back the state-owned enterprises to the center stage.
Okay.
Earlier, there was some phase since Deng Xiaoping until Hu Jintao, the previous Chinese president, they had a period of liberalization or reform and opening up. But under Xi Jinping, he has actually increased the strength of the state-owned enterprises that are not efficient. But he wants them fully under control. He's a totalitarian, and therefore he does not believe in this reform and opening up. So as a result of that, the Chinese economy is also slowing down because they have not been able to do the necessary structural and internal reforms. And that's going to have an effect on the BRI as well, Anurag, because, BRI are supposed to spend $500 billion or even up to $1 trillion abroad to support, infrastructure growth and corridors, connectivity. But if the economy is slowing down, the GDP growth rate is slowing down, if there are more riots and more uprisings and these kind of problems at home, they will not be able to really implement the Chinese dream of, connecting the whole world under a Chinese hegemony. So I think the BRI projects, some of them you mentioned in Africa also, they're slowing down. Some of the loan commitments are also declining.
Okay, final comment. I mean, when the economy is slowing down and China is also facing some problem, but serious problem for the Xi Jinping and the present Chinese dispensation is coming from Hong Kong. And police is warning the protesters it can be very, very dangerous. So can we say that ultimately, eventually, the Chinese administration is going to suppress the pro-democracy protest by force? How do you see the entire thing?
Well, Xi Jinping, as you know, is a complete autocrat. He does not believe in any opposition and that he thinks that these are all terrorists. But the fact is that the majority of the protesters in Hong Kong are peaceful and non-violent. And because Hong Kong has been embedded in the, the Western finance and global networks of transport and communication, it's not easy to do what they did in Tiananmen Square in 1989 when they killed thousands of protesters by mowing them down on the streets. So in Hong Kong, I think they will have to adopt a kind of a more patient game, what they call strategic patience. But at the same time, they're trying to divide the society between those who say, look, it's enough of protests. There's been loss of business and of economic prosperity, and let's just be pragmatic and get on with it. So they have got the pro-China faction, and they're then trying to use that to counter the revolutionary faction, which wants democracy and freedom in Hong Kong. So I think Hong Kong is actually exposing the weakness of the Xi Jinping model, Anurag, because Xi Jinping model is tight control, and no questions asked. But the people are saying, we don't want that. We are in the 21st century. This is not, Xi Jinping thinks of himself as a second Mao. As a Mao Zedong. But the problem is that in 21st century, with internet connectivity, with knowledge, and with all the integration, even many Chinese people in the mainland have access, even though the Chinese firewall tries to preserve them and protect them from the outside world and from information blackout, still they are able to access information outside, and many of them know the reality that people are living freer. Okay, China achieved a lot in 70 years of communism. It brought people out of poverty. It became superpower. But now, people are saying, okay, now we have enough to eat. most of us, there is hardly any absolute poverty left, but now we want freedom. So I think Xi Jinping model ultimately has limits. He has crushed all the dissent, all the opposition in the party. He has wiped out the civil society, lawyers, NGOs, no opposition. He is like a modern day emperor.
That's
But
right.
still,
That's right.
all empires fall, and I think that is why they are reinforcing the message at the 70th anniversary. You never know, these structures look very strong, but revolt may come up here and there, and suddenly their brittleness can be exposed.
Yeah,
So
with
I think
prosperity, many things come. I mean, the money has come now. Probably with the sense would come that they need the freedom. They need the freedom of expression as well. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Cholia, for joining us and putting your views about how the China would behave in coming years. And probably, as Professor Cholia has also said, that Hong Kong and the protest in Hong Kong is showing the weakness of the China style of authority, and that is a major concern for the China. Though on his 70th years of the Communist Party rule, there was a huge military parade to celebrate the occasion. Approximately 15,000 troops along with the tanks, missiles and high-tech drones paraded down the avenue of eternal peace, and Xi Jinping, president, with other Communist Party leaders, watched from the rostrum overlooking, and state media described this as a country's biggest ever military parade. Xi Jinping delivered in his speech invoked a Chinese dream of national rejuvenation, his grand vision of restoring the country's perceived past glory, and that he wants to achieve by 2035, and that is a Chinese dream. We are going to take a short break and we'll come back. We'll also talk about the growing Chinese hegemony in Asia and particularly in Southeast Asia, South China Sea, and how the other countries are facing the threat after the short break. Welcome back. We are talking about China's Communist Party rule. 1st of October 1949, Chairman Mao declared the day, and today China celebrating 70 years of Communist Party rule. This is important for China, as China is nursing an ambition to become world's #1 economy and establish its hegemony. The event was meant to extol China's journey from a poor nation to being the world's second largest economy. There was a huge military parade to celebrate the occasion. Approximately 15,000 troops took part in this parade, along with the tanks, missiles and high-tech drones, which was paraded down in the avenue of the eternal peace, and President Xi Jinping and other senior Communist Party leaders watched from rostrum overlooking the parade. State media described this as the country's biggest ever military parade. Xi Jinping delivered speech invoking Chinese dream of national rejuvenation, his grand vision of restoring the country to perceived past glory. Xi Jinping also faces some clutches of challenges, as from the US trade war to months of unrest and democracy protest in Hong Kong. US trade war negotiations have been going on, and African swine fever has raged through the country's pig supply, and that has sent pork prices in China soaring. But the major headache is coming from Hong Kong, where the pro-democracy protests hit the streets early in a bid to grab the spotlight from Beijing, with a series of rallies against what they see as the erosion of their spatial freedom. Though Hong Kong police has warned these protesters, has said that it could be very, very dangerous. So we're going to talk about that, how China's dream, and how the President Xi Jinping has described that no one can shake China. One more guest has joined me. Namrata Hasija has joined me from Taiwan. She is Research Associate, CCAS. Very warm welcome to the show, Namrata. How do you see what Xi Jinping has said, that no one can shake China? He has also given a message to the protesters in Hong Kong, that the people of the China will work towards the reunification. President Xi Jinping wants to take China to its past glory. How do you make of his statement?
So Anurag, let me also take you back to the recent the white paper, the defense white paper that has been released by China in July 2019. I think that paper also clearly highlights the ambitions and the China dream that President Xi Jinping has outlined for China. So it is not only Hong Kong, but you also see that the continued problems that it is having with its neighbors, be it Japan, be it Taiwan, or be it Philippines, Vietnam, and also India, because we also need to focus on the statements that they have been saying. So in this defense white paper, they have very clearly said that the Doklam issue has been unresolved, and they are going to resolve the same. And also, I would like to draw your attention to an incident that happened on His Dalai Lama, His Holiness Dalai Lama's birthday. So the Chinese officials actually entered into Demchok, and they stopped, a few of Ladakhis who were celebrating His Holiness' birthday, and they said they should not be celebrating the birthday. So this, along with, you see, the US-China trade war, and especially what is happening in Hong Kong, the Chinese media, the Chinese official media has said that it is the handiwork of the foreign hostile powers, and they are not going to let them succeed. So I think despite all the pressure that Xi Jinping is facing, be it the US-China trade war, or be it Hong Kong, or be it internal pressure from China slowing down economy, Xi Jinping and the Communist Party of China has made it very clear that they are not going to hold back on the China dream, on reunification of China. And especially in this defense white paper, they have said that China remains the only major power that has not been reunified, that has not seen unification. So I think these, yes.
When he says that the people of the China will work hard for the reunification of the China, and then that means reunification in terms of a complete accession of the Hong Kong, or probably the accession of the Taiwan as well. So what does it mean to the people who are living in Taiwan, and let's say the people who are living in Hong Kong?
See, complete reunification, of course, means Hong Kong, of course, means Taiwan, but it does not only mean Hong Kong and Taiwan. It also means South China Sea. It also means it's, East China Sea, where it is laying claims, which rival claims with Japan. So it means all these territories that, according to China, they lost during the unequal treaties, or during, during the Qing dynasty. So when they say reunification, and when this defense paper says that it is the only major power that has not been reunified, they are talking about all their territorial claims, be it Hong Kong, Taiwan, be it with India, Japan, Philippines, Vietnam. So all these countries, all are these territorial claims. So yes, their first target, of course, would be to pacify, or whatever means they can use to derail all these protests that are happening in Hong Kong. Taiwan is also, the second most important place that Xi Jinping has always referred to. And they are not stopping here. That's what I'm saying. Look at the way the Chinese officials came in, and they threatened the Indian nationals that they cannot, celebrate His Holiness Dalai Lama's birthday, because all these people who stay in Ladakh, they are actually followers of Tibetan Buddhism. This is the first time that it has happened. So it is not only that we should be, looking at what is happening in Hong Kong, or what, Xi Jinping is saying about Taiwan. We should always also look at what is happening with Japan, even though and also South China Sea, because in 2014, Xi Jinping actually said that they are not going to militarize the artificial islands that they are building, but they have not, stuck to the promise. They have.
If I ask you the final question about that, with the kind of messages coming from China, I mean, China is not going to change its attitude towards, let's say, its neighboring countries. How do you see the relation of the China and India in coming years?
I think, especially if they, because they have definitely mentioned Doklam issue, and the way they have also raised Kashmir issue at not only the UN, but they have also supported Pakistan on the Kashmir issue, and they have their foreign ministry also issued statement that Ladakh is an integral part of China. They call it Little Tibet. So I think the problems will be there, and I think we cannot ignore these things. We cannot ignore the statements. We cannot ignore officials entering our own territory and threatening our own nationals. So India and China, and of course China with other neighboring countries, as I said, be it Vietnam, Philippines, or Japan, they will have a tough time. These countries, and especially I think China is not ready to kind of mellow down in whatever territorial claims that they have. So I think we will have some bumps in our relationship with and some obstacles in our relationship. It's only if China, which it's not showing any sign of
slowing down,
leaving and territorial claims. So I think India needs to look out for its own, and kind of have a very strong and a foreign policy. And if China is not China is claiming its own territorial claims, and it claims almost be it South China Sea, East China Sea, India, they're claiming everywhere. So I think India should have a foreign policy, which it is having right now, of kind of holding its own ground.
Okay. So that may be a message to its neighboring country, including India. Thank you very much, Namrata Hasija, for joining me from Taiwan. Namrata Hasija was talking to me that the kind of message Xi Jinping has said in his speech, that no force can shake China, and that probably he wants to take China to pristine glory and the complete reunification, and that reunification comes for also what you call infringes the territorial claim of many countries, including India, as China has been saying about Tibet, about some part of the Ladakh, and especially Arunachal Pradesh, as we all know, and that will create problem with the China and India, the relation between the two countries are concerned. That's all we have in this edition of Public Forum. Thank you very much for watching.